We have our only guy. We'll start with Chris Collin. And Chris is a T5 paraplegic as of 2008. So for 13 years, he's been a wheelchair user, very involved in adaptive sports from the beginning of his injury, and currently work for a wheelchair manufacturer called Motion Composites. And they provide lightweight, a lot of what they do is carbon fiber and for manual wheelchair users and other products as well, since not everyone covers carbon fiber, unfortunately. And a diligent advocacy rights person who is in DC all the time and joins in on every one of these conversations to help protect CRT and all the devices that keep us healthy. Next, we have Tamara. She is an occupational therapist for 45 years, ATP SMS, and she directs Posture 24/7 and the Eleanor's Project, promoting 24-hour posture care management and appropriate seating for wheeled mobility, provision in low resource settings. She has presented on these topics in the United States, Canada, Peru, and Colombia. Tamara works part-time for Moving Mountains Therapy Center in Missouri and has served children and adults with complex neurodisabilities in Montana since 1983. And she credits her daughter, Eleanor, born with cerebral palsy and profound deafness, as her teacher in the importance of CRT. And then Allie Ingersoll is, a lot of things. She's a day trader. She's a marketing consultant, disability advocate. She's a writer, a great writer, a blogger, editor, and a public speaker. And she started her advocacy mission after being repeatedly denied medically necessary equipment by insurance companies over the last 10 years. She is a C6 quadriplegic, full-time wheelchair user after a shallow diving accident. And I have Jenny Border. Jenny is a digital coordinator and community consciousness consulting in Dayton, Ohio. She helps to facilitate and manage digital relationships and footprints for clients. She also helps marketing brands in the community, within the disability community, and much, much more. And let's see, who don't I have a bio on? So Madonna, you're muted.
I did. I just sent it.
So why don't you just tell us that? Because I know, yeah, just tell us because I know, yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Brag on yourself a little, Madonna.
Yeah. Oh, great. Hi. So I'm Madonna Long. I'm a T4, T5 paraplegic. I was injured in 1981 here in actually the little town I live in now in Wyoming, from a school bus accident. I am the mother of 4 amazing children, and I am the nana to 2, Alex and Wyatt. For the past 14 years, I worked with Pride Mobility Products and Quantum Rehab as their consumer advocate, primarily on public policy for complex rehab technology and those particular issues, which has been amazing. And this is how I know all of the fabulous people that you're seeing here today. And I'm so blessed for that. I've worked in policy for accessible transportation, especially taxis. I thought that was probably one of the most exciting things I got to do, is really understanding transportation and how hard it is for people with disabilities, especially people who use wheelchairs, to be able to integrate in society. And I live in Kimmer, Wyoming. I'm back up here where I grew up. I love it. It is a little challenging to get around, but my power chair really takes me there. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yes. And I didn't miss anyone. I think that's it for the panel, right? Right, Annette?
Did you get Molly?
I did not get Molly. I don't think I have a bio on Molly. So Molly,
No, you probably don't have a bio on
okay.
me.
Yeah, feel
I-
free to tell us about yourself.
Oh, well, So like right before my 46th birthday, I became living in this little quadriplegic body. My entry into this field here with the CRT came, I believe, through a documentary film that was made about me, and it showed me going from the prognosis of no movement past my shoulders to being able to stand and ambulate with balance support. And so there's this whole stream of how that happened. And so I've been involved in the CRT arena for 11 years now, doing work, spreading mud on the walls, if you will, for all of us. I recently, 5 years ago, I moved out of the Bay Area. And when I was in the Bay Area, I was a community asset for Stanford University. So I would work with their students in the engineering department in the arena of adaptive equipment, right? Gosh, what else? I am the representative from the United States for disability in the martial art of Aikido. So I travel all over the United States and into Europe for teaching. And I think that's probably where I am at the moment.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with Tamara giving us a thorough definition of what is CRT.
Okay, thank you. For anybody here who doesn't know about what CRT is, I think most of you probably do, but you may need an elevator speech to be able to share with somebody. Complex rehab technology is basically referring to equipment for people with disabilities that is medically necessary and individually configured. And the medically necessary and especially individually configured is the really important piece here. These devices require evaluation, fitting, often trial equipment. And once the equipment is acquired, configuration, specialized adjustment, programming if there are electronics involved. This is not an out-of-the-box hospital or grocery store wheelchair. So what we're talking about here is custom to the specific needs of an individual. Somebody else coming along is not necessarily going to find that easy or comfortable to be able to use. And some of the examples of devices that fall under this big CRT umbrella are individually configured manual wheelchairs, power wheelchairs, seating and positioning systems, and other equipment such as standing devices and gait trainers. And this is all very different from standard DME. It's important that people not confuse DME and CRT because durable medical equipment is designed to be usable by many different people with varying needs over time. It might even be rentable. And examples of DME would be a standard tub bench, a hospital style wheelchair, or a basic walker. So we're really differentiating here between CRT and basic DME.
Thank you. That's a great explanation because especially people, well, anyone outside of this community, and especially people in the political arena who they think it's all the same. So using that CRT language is always extremely important with a definition because like we talked about this week in advocating, even if I think they've heard it before, I'm going to give the definition of CRT. I'm going to assume they really don't understand that and bring that up first. So we'll start off with the question that I'm pretty much posing to anyone who wants to answer. So you guys can just kind of jump in and take turns. So the first question that I have for everyone is, why is it important to change federal rules and policy concerning CRT? And we'll just kind of see how this roundtable thing goes without me calling on everyone. So feel free to jump in.
So I'll jump in. So the reason that we want to change, obviously federal regulations for CRT is exactly what Tamara just said, or for CRT, because CRT is not DME. And all of those specialized components go to make up somebody's entire product that fits their disability. It's unique to them. It's specialized for them. It's sort of like a wheelchair is a prosthetic with wheels. So it's very individualized. And we need to make sure that we do that so that all of us and the many people that use CRT can have their individual products made specifically for them, for their functionality.
You know, one way that I have talked about this with people is the idea of sort of having 3 pots of money. For example, with Medicare, which is the gold standard because it trickles down to Medicaid and private insurances, there's a pot of money for orthotics and prosthetics. Now, we all know that orthotics and prosthetics are going to be custom fit and designed for the individual person, right? And then there's a special pot of money that is for speech generating devices. And again, those are really technical. There's lots of programming and evaluation involved. And then we've got this pot of money for DME. And as things stand now, CRT is lumped in with DME. And CRT really has much more in common with speech generating devices and orthotics prosthetics than it does with a standard tub bench or a basic walker that is manufactured in droves and sold at Walgreens.
That's a great explanation. Anyone else, feel free to jump in. Well, I will say that I think that one of the reasons I think it's so important is because they don't really understand that the secondary complications to not having this equipment are exponentially more expensive than the upfront cost of getting the proper technology. So although when we take a piece of legislation to DC and they score the bill, they don't ever score the exponential cost savings that when you prevent a wound or further scoliosis, and you keep people healthy so that they can live their lives, be employed, and pay taxes. So
I would second that because, you know, with the secondary complications that you mentioned, Karen, you know, I have a case in point with an example. I had a pressure sore because I didn't have the right cushion, and I did a cost benefit analysis for health insurance, and they spent $66,000 for a pressure sore and surgeries attached to that when they could have just provided the right cushion early on in my spinal cord injury career. But I didn't know any better, and I didn't have anyone to help me either. So.
Yeah, that's huge. that's why I love Allie's approach. I mean, she'll kill him with some data and some numbers with her day trader background. I feel like she, you know, that is exactly what it takes to win a battle, and why Allie's been successful in fighting these denials when they come up, because she don't play. Like when she brings something to the table, it's, you know, it's got a lot of data behind it to back it up.
We'll go into details at 11:15 on battle strategies.
Yeah.
I would like to add to both what Madonna and Allie and Karen was saying is that it's a huge having CRT brought to the federal level is yes, definitely, because we're all very much individuals. I believe on this panel, I am the only one that is not paralyzed. I have a disability called arthrogryposis, which I was born with, just developmental disability. I guess, yeah, that's what it is, because I can't do things as well because from birth. Anyway, the big thing for me, because also, or let me rephrase that, is that for myself, I can technically transfer very well and kind of ambulate. However, for like a CRT, for a wheelchair, my wheelchair, the functionalities I get out of it, that because it's specific to me, is something I could never get out of a regular DME equipment. For example, I have fit my wheelchair with my providers and with my ATP therapist and everyone to be able to help myself get dressed. It's a little bit unique for sure, but it does, it gets the job done. Because if I didn't have my chair, similar to what Allie was saying, I was going with how much it would cost to not have the, or let me rephrase that. All right, how much it would be if I didn't have my chair, I would have to have an individual aide come in every day for sure to help me. And over time, I mean, I believe in a year it costs around $55,000, I think, to have a personal care assistant. However, I could definitely use some help, but because of my chair, that probably 50 some thousand, I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure, but it's very expensive. Every 5 years makes a lot more sense for insurance if they are talking about numbers, crunching numbers, than the 50 some thousand, every year. However, I know I am a unique case, while individuals do need that help all the time. So, I mean, I think that's a big reason of pushing it, because yes, I can technically ambulate a little bit, but in the long run, it does help. And if I were to fall, if I didn't have my chair, that would make me functionally very much like a quadriplegic, in the sense of my arms and legs, they somewhat work, but they're not functional to, I don't know, pick up a glass of water, or, you reach the microwave, because they can't go any farther than this. They're very much like a little kind of like a little person with short, stubby arms and legs.
I mean, there's no way you could get the long distances either. I mean, I've seen you walk, and I know that your like balance can be an issue as well. And as much as you go and do and travel the country, there's no way, even from an energy standpoint, that you could be as functional as you are without that chair. Well, I think I'm going to move to the next question. And again, it's kind of everybody just jump in. It is, how is your life affected when you do not have the equipment that you need? We somewhat answered that question just now, but I think, yeah, go ahead, Molly.
Let me jump in here, because I've just had this experience for the first time in 26 years. I've been really fortunate in the equipment that I've received, but my power chair stopped functioning, and it turned out it needed a whole new brain. That's beside the point. For 2 weeks, I was in a loaner. Fortunately, I had a loaner that was a power chair, because I'm in the country, and I use my manual chair for the first 2 weeks, but I could only go on hardscape, right? I'm not going down to feed my mare in a manual chair. So the loaner was, it had a cushion on it that was just a standard piece of foam. And, I put a sheepskin over it because I knew it was foam. But in 2 weeks, I had my first ever in 26 years, just a red spot on the ischial tuberosity on my right bun. It was like 2 weeks. I went, oh my God, because I have always had, fortunately, what I've needed. And man, that really brought it home. I mean, I know the stories, where a friend just ended up getting out of the hospital after 6 months for a decubitus breakdown. And, I hear the stories, but this was a personal wow, a moment. And like I say, in 2 weeks' time, bam. So grateful to have what I have that keeps me healthy. All the positioning. Wow, what a huge asset.
Yeah. And once that skin breakdown happens, that area is always going to be weakened. You're always going, it's never going to be the same, and you're going to be battling that for the rest of your life.
It only went, I have sensation, fortunately, so I could feel that there was something that wasn't right. And fortunately, it was just pink. There was no breakdown, but there was definitely irritation.
On the other side of the aisle, from leaving secondary medical complications aside, from a quality of life perspective, your life pretty much stops when you don't have the equipment you need. So
Yeah.
we've all had our power wheelchairs break. So I have a seat elevator, and when I had to sit in a loaner chair, I couldn't bring my chair up to the desk for work. I couldn't reach the microwave with my seat elevator. I couldn't bring the wheelchair up to a level surface for transferring on the bed for caregivers, which increased risks of falls and breaks and fractures and so forth. So your life pretty much comes to a crashing halt
Yeah.
if you don't have this one piece of equipment, which is key, as so many of us can likely attest to.
Yeah. Huge difference.
Yeah, and it not only affects power chair users, and it actually affects manual chair users too. The biggest thing for me is I've got a backrest that I worked on for many years to actually finally find something that would actually work for me and actually would support me. I've got rods that go on both sides of my spine, and it becomes a teeter-totter on the top of the backrest, and I get breakdown of my skin, kind of like what you get on your bottom, except for on my back. And without that, if I went with just a standard back, I wouldn't have the support to actually hold myself up and be able to move my hands and get things done, even push my wheelchair. So I need that support of a hard back that gives me lateral support and back and forth support, something I can lean against that's not going to give, so that way I can get my posture right, and then I can actually breathe. Because that's another thing is, if you have bad posture, you're not breathing 100% right, and you're not going to get everything out of your day, and you're going to be very tired by the end of the day, and you're just never going to get your lung capacity that you could actually get with sitting up straight.
Chris, did insurance buy that argument? Did they accept that, or did you have to fight for that?
So it was a fight. It was basically, I kept on trying. Luckily, I had a good therapist that was actually allowing me to try multiple backs. And they had demos and stuff like that I was trying out. But once I ended up going with one back, I had to actually prove to them that I had a medically necessary reason to change that back, which after a couple months of using that back, I had skin breakdown on my spine, and had to go to the hospital, and then that's the medically necessary thing. But instead of, if we actually got this stuff ahead of time, we wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to have a spot on my back that I have to always watch and have to go through that downtime of, I can't lean against my backrest now because it has to heal. So now I have to lay in my bed until it heals. So all that time that I'm down, and then all the muscle that I lose, all the mental fatigue that I have, that all plays a factor into it too.
Plus you work full time. So
Right.
the potential for getting,
Yeah.
fired, or at least you're with no pay, right? You run out of sick days and you're kind of stuck.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, when my kids, when they were little, and actually still now, occasionally I'll be in the bed and they'll take the wheelchair away from me. They like to go play around in it, and they're like gone. And that's when I realized, like, I literally can't do anything without it. Like, I take a little bit, probably take it for granted that it's always next to my bed and that I'm always in it, and that I live alone and can function and work full time and travel the United States. If you take it away from me, I'm bedridden. And there's a example of an ATP that's a friend of mine who ran across a client that had been using another supplier and gave him a chair that didn't work for him. He'd been in bed for 186 days. And as Chris said, that's it's a good way to die.
Well,
I
do you
mean,
guys
yeah.
think like I think one of the major problems, why we need the right equipment, and we're always continuing to fight that battle, which is exhausting for not only us but our providers and those people fighting our battles, is the problem is that Part A doesn't talk to Part B, right? So Part A is over here paying all these hospital bills, paying all these medical expenses, and Part B is over here saying, yeah, you just can't get that unless it's medically necessary. And if Part A was over here saying, hey, stupid, you know how much you just paid? It's the same money. And that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem when it comes to, being able to get that equipment. Because you know what, quite frankly, we're not out peddling this stuff on the corner, and it's not why we need it, right? we need it because we're functional. My first wheelchair was, it had a name, like people still call it here in high school. It's called Birth of the Beast. And it was Everest and Jennings. And the reason I got that hunk of junk was because my dad had changed insurance on Friday. Bus wreck happens on Sunday. We have no insurance. So I got whatever Medicare. And thank God I had worked years and years before my 18, I was 18 and got injured, because this is what I got. And I had no idea there. And this is about the time Quickie came out. And I had no idea that there was any kind of other type. I thought, yeah, this wheelchair here. Yeah. And so when I got my first Quickie, that thing went off a cliff. My friend and I, Leah, we sat on the ground. We had it went off the cliff. But what it did to me was, because it wasn't proper, it wasn't CRT, I had no seating and positioning in 1981. One of my hips is about 1.5 inches lower now. And there's no way you're fixing that. You can only fix that with the technology under my seat. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
So it's important that we get the right equipment.
Yeah, because once the skeletal deformities and the obliquities and the contractures and things that happen, a lot of times those aren't fixable. They're preventable, but they are very difficult. Then you live with that for the rest of your life, which then increases your chance of not sitting midline and then having a wound.
As Madonna was saying, that speaks to the point of preventative versus reactive healthcare, right? And so that's a systemic change that insurance companies and governmental systems and policies, they still are not getting. You get emails every day from your insurance company talking about preventative healthcare and check your blood sugar and go to the gym, but they leave out the segment of the population. We're not that large that
Right.
that's really critical for preventive healthcare, and it saves them more money in the long run.
Yeah, the CDC website talks about the importance of regular exercise and even standing. There are reams of data for able-bodied people to the advantages of standing more frequently. But then for some reason for us, because we can't do it independently, it doesn't matter. It's not medically necessary, really, because you said it was. So why isn't it for us? If anybody...
I'd like to add to that, especially with the seating functions, said even though I can technically stand and walk, with my chair, it is a standing chair. If I didn't have it, I would be really ornery. No one would want to deal with me. Without it, I actually recently had a little repairs that needed to be done on my on the standing feature only, so the chair technically was working, and it's probably TMI, but I mean, without the standing feature, my breathing got significantly worse. And in addition, which I think a lot of individuals, able-bodied or disabled or whatever or not, I mean, I wasn't able to honestly go to the bathroom, number 2 as well. I mean, it was a few days and stuff, because just having it with the chair, like I said, I stand, having it to open up my lungs and the bones, because with my disability, I have a significant amount of contractures everywhere, even though you can hear or see via the video or whatnot that I'm talking very well, that I actually have contractures even in my mouth and things, and that took a long time. Anyway, all this to say, just because I could use the stand feature and stuff, I mean, I could sleep better at night and all the variety of different things. And Madonna, when she was talking about her first chair, Big Bertha, I believe, it made me think of the first time I got a power chair. I believe I was 4 or 5 in 1989, and it took significantly longer for me to get it, because first chair they demoed me in was a pediatrics kids chair, but I couldn't get in it, so every time I would need to get in it, I'd have to have someone literally lift me or get out of it, and I couldn't even actually drive it, because for myself, with how my hands are, you can see they're in the middle. For some reason, the therapist stuff, the joystick was literally fused to the side, either left or right. So if I were to try to drive it, I would have to put my head on the side and drive really special. So it took so much longer for me, which they were open to getting me a power chair, I should say, when I was actually 2.5, which is very rare back then, I believe. But And, it took longer, which obviously affects since I was growing up, developmental, ability to learn because kids need to explore. And I just kind of had to roll around on the floor. So, yeah.
Yeah. So the final question is, why is mobility so important to you? So it seems fairly obvious, but let's go over all the 8 million reasons why mobility is important.
I'd like to speak to that from the family perspective. Obviously, I'm not a wheelchair user myself, but I've been helping people who are wheelchair users for years, and I lived with it as a mother. And I think if you want to, there's a certain quality of life that people are entitled to in terms of freedom, not only just for themselves as individuals, but also in the context that they live in. And so to be able to engage with family, to be able to engage with friends, to be able to go places and do things in that context of your natural environment is part of being a human being. And I think back on my life with Eleanor and how our life, not just her life, but our life as a family came to a grinding halt if there was something wrong with her equipment. I think about a camping trip that we went on and she ended up with 2 flats. And like, what do you do when you're 70 miles from the nearest place where maybe you can get those flats fixed and you're sleeping in a tent? So it kind of radiates out to all the people around the person who is using and depending upon this equipment.
That's a great point. It's not just impacting the person, it's impacting the whole family system and possibly friends as well.
Wow, that's I think that's a great answer, Tamara. I think mobility to me, and I don't know if I'm the oldest in here that had the longest. Maybe Molly and I are sort of there. But so I'm coming up on 40 years this year. And 40 years of having the right equipment for my mobility has been the ability to, first of all, just be out in society, right? To have a job, to raise 4 children. And I mean, I don't think I was smart with the first 2 because one was 18 months apart. You never want to have an 18-month-old and a newborn. I'm just saying. Jason, you're in a wheelchair. So, but you know what? One of the greatest things is I got to go to those football games. My son, I remember when he went in the Navy, he wrote me this letter and he said, "Mom, I so appreciate you because you're a mom just like everybody else." He said, "You showed up for those games and it was hard. And you were up there selling candy at concessions and you couldn't even see over the counter." And he remembered all these things, but it was really so I could just be a mom and raise my children like everybody else. And mobility meant that I could go fight for other people like all of us have on Capitol Hill, right? If we didn't have the mobility and everything that was uniquely made for our chairs, we don't function. Just like Karen said, being in that bed, right? You do not function. And the better that your mobility product is, the better your mobility will be within your environment, at home, cooking. I mean, doing anything that anybody else that's able-bodied doesn't even have a clue of what mobility means to us. And their mobility is like a shoe that fits, right? And right? I mean, seriously, like, could you tell somebody, yeah, you live in Wyoming now, and guess what? You get sandals. That's all you get. Can you imagine that one, right? They'd be like, no, I'm not going there, right? Well, that's all what we're saying is our mobility is about our life. It's truly about everything that Jenny and Molly and Chris, all of us get to be able to experience differently, but it's the same outcome.
Yeah, speaking to both of your points, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, without our CRTs, none of us would be here on this call today, right? None of us would be able to participate. And speaking from personal experience of living in bed for an entire year, looking at 4 walls with pressure sores and multiple surgeries and being trapped, the human element about not being part of society and feeling part of something. And, I have a lot of shoulder issues, so I can't, as a C6 quadriplegic, I can't push a manual chair. So I've been stuck in a meal chair before when I was living over in China abroad, and I couldn't go anywhere. And I lost the complete human experience of being part of society, which I think is, our physical independence, but our mental independence is equally as important, if not more.
Yeah, that brings, a friend of mine is doing something, and it's to bring awareness to the amount of suicide that happens in our community for people with disabilities. And, CMS and the government doesn't seem to really care about, does this, medically necessary to them means, can you use this device to be independent with your medically related activities of daily living? Okay. In the home, by the way, they don't care if we go anywhere ever. But on top of that, like, depression is a real thing. And even when we have the right equipment, our lives can be as beautiful as I think my life is. It is quite difficult. And you talk about depression and suicide, like those are real issues. And it's that we not only die of sepsis, but you can also die of depression. So.
Yeah, I think our independence is kind of looked at a little bit differently before injury, or if you're born with it, it's a little bit different. But if you had your independence before and then you lose it from a disability or an accident or anything like that, it's definitely a weird thing, and you really understand how independent you really are. Some people think that you weren't, like, you just kind of go with the flow and everything. And, but when you kind of get almost strapped down, it's kind of like if you had an able-bodied person, you want to kind of give them the experience, strap them down to a board and then just push them around in places and just leave them in spots for time after time and see how they kind of react. And it's the same idea. So you really, you thrive on that independence. And I mean, I've actually gone kind of the extreme of it. And every time I get a chance to do any kind of sport or any kind of activity, I go out and do it and try to get the best out of life. And I try to exacerbate the experience with my independence, just to show myself that I have the independence to do it. So I might as well do it and enjoy it. But not everybody gets that. So with CRT, I mean, that's something that I'm able to do because I have CRT. But if we didn't have it, then where would I be?
With a lot of these, stakeholders in our community, I always say to them, it's kind of my tagline is disability doesn't discriminate, right? Any one of us can join this undesirable club for any moment. So we would hope that, our stakeholders in the community would pay attention to and take ownership of making CRT and other medically necessary equipment more accessible for wheelchair users, because it's a global issue, and a senator or a congressman could find themselves in a wheelchair tomorrow. I hope not, but they could.
Ellie, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that it's really difficult to find a larger number of people to advocate for our issues. So I've sometimes said you can, if Ducks Unlimited or whatever wants people to lobby, they'll find tons and tons of people. But people in the disability community oftentimes are just trying to keep their head above water, whether they're families or the person who has the impairment. And it's really important for us to get our neighbors and our friends and people whose lives have not necessarily been personally touched to step up the plate, because we need more numbers.
I always think, does anybody, my bucket list is to get rid of the in-home rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That should be our bucket list, right? To get rid of the in-home rule. Like, what the hell did these? Sorry, I said that hell word.
You can say
But,
that. I think.
But what are they thinking over there? Like, really? Seriously?
No, I know. It's like, yeah, what kind of, if you said that to any other American citizen, we're only concerned with how you function in your home. That is insanity. It's insanity.
Yeah.
But then they don't have
I always think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are reaching like 45. And I'm not sure, Annette, if are we opening this up for questions in the chat at all, or?
Sure, yeah. And we have a 15-minute time period where we can go over a little bit if you want to, if people want to comment or ask questions. That
I
would
think
be
we're
great.
all happy
You
to
can
do
send it
that.
in the chat.
I wanted to add to the last question, if that's okay. And that was, making everybody really is with my CRT or whatever, with the right equipment. I feel like a human. I know that like everyone else was saying, it's really just, I feel like I'm just a person, not just something that breathes, I guess you would say. And I don't even know where to go with it, but I'm still excited with what Madonna said about the in-home necessity of the equipment. We're more than just in-home. And oh yeah, now I remember, it was what Chris was saying about him going on the extreme with, Mind the Adventurous. As someone with a congenital disability, born with it, that, I feel like it's always been an uphill battle to prove I could do things. Especially physical things, because, I don't know how to do it. I was never learned how to do it with a quote normal body. As you can see, I kind of try to do quotes here. Anyway, just like, with my CRT, it's what allows me to, go to a concert and be as tall as someone that's 6'3" because I'm up elevated and quasi standing and stuff, or other ridiculous things like, there was something wrong with my van on the top of the antenna. Nobody was around. Because of the CRT, I was able to safely climb on top of it, literally, and just what I needed. Hey, and it was actually, Madonna, due to the antenna got broke after a DC visit. Is a parking garage was I have just a minivan, so it's not super high, but it hit the top thingy when I was backing into the handicap spot, because you had to back into it to get the ramp with the lines, and it was like people bobbling like this. That drives me nuts. In driving 6 hours, I cannot do, plus 6+ hours. Yeah, that had to be taped down. No one else would do it. So I was like, okay, I do it. Let's go. And did it safely.
That was when you drove, that time you drove to DC, right?
Well, when I got back, actually, a bit, because it was like in the evening and no one would help. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I don't care. It's going to happen.
That's so shocking, Jenny. I'm so surprised at you.
Oh, I bet you
I
are.
don't know. Jenny takes the bull by the horns on every single thing. And if she can't not find someone in 5 minutes, she will take the bull by the horns and do it. But Tamara made a good point earlier that I wanted to touch on. And now I'm going to forget what it was. Okay, I forgot. Literally forgot because
We need numbers of people. Is that it?
Oh yeah. Okay. So thank you. None of us would be on this panel. Like the fact that we have the privilege of being here and actually in getting to DC, because all of us do that kind of advocacy work as well when it's not COVID, is because we've had the proper CRT. We fought for it. Whatever that reason was, that we came from a family of fighters, that we came from a family of somewhat of maybe privileged people with an education, people that weren't fighting other types of discrimination. But I was fighting for my stuff at 19 years old. That's because my father and my mother are scary people that you don't mess with. And if I didn't get what I needed, they will, you better watch out. Therefore, we have the privilege of getting to DC to advocate because we're healthy enough to get there. And then all of our friends in the disability community who are figuring out how to get to the grocery store maybe, or waiting for a personal care attendant that never shows up. It's CRT and standing devices and seat elevation, those technologies that we've had the privilege to have that have put us in the position to advocate for others. And it's an honor and a privilege.
That's a really great point, Karen. I mentor a lot of quadriplegics as well myself, and they want to get involved, but they can't, as you mentioned, especially I can only speak to being a quadriplegic, but that fear every single day when you wake up, is the care attendant going to come in? Are they going to help you? Are they going to show up or just walk out? Are you going to, how many catheters can you get from Medicare just dealing with your daily life, let alone trying to think about a complicated seating system? So the challenges are huge. So many of us who are so lucky enough to be here and advocate and are healthy. And, as you mentioned, my dad is a bulldog too. when I was first injured, if I needed something, he is terrifying if you get in his way. And I learned from him, but many people don't have a support system. And many of us appear here today to have a support system around us. And I always say, you know, it takes a village to raise a baby. Well, it kind of takes a village to raise a quad too, when you go through a life-altering event. And it's true. I would not be here without the support system around me. I mean, hands down. So it's always a group effort.
Yeah.
I say that all the time. Like, I learned from them. It's probably genetically infused that I don't take no for an answer just because someone says no. And I'm very, very thankful for that.
No is a starting negotiation point.
Right.
I 100% agree. I learned my dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he was a growly puss. I'm just going to be honest with you. He pushed into me when I was little the need for education. You know, back then, actually, when I started, the ADA was not passed yet, and they wanted to put me in a special school. I mean, I did go for a special preschool because it helped me learn my wheelchair and stuff. But anyway, all that to say, no, with him being a stubborn, grumbly butt, and my mom too, pushing it and everything, is that, like, I mean, I learned early on, okay, if I don't get, like typical kid, if I don't get what I want, if I can't do this, then throw a temper tantrum. So one time I remember my parents saying, okay, Jenny, go, you know, to the legislators. This was in the state of Michigan where I grew up. And we had a meeting. I don't remember much of it. I remember I had candy afterwards because I did a good job. But, you know, they're like, explain why you need a chair that goes down to the floor. And they're like, weren't listening. So I literally just threw my butt out of the little manual chair I was in and threw a temper tantrum. And I don't think I kicked a hole in the wall, but I definitely flailed. I mean, I was like under 7 for sure, probably 5. But hey, I got candy out of it. But you know, you're saying because I learned, oh, I have to do this to get things. I'm going to continue doing it in real things. Now that I've gotten older, others, they don't have the option. I'm like, okay, well, if I have to do that, I will. Don't really like to. But if anyone does need anyone to throw a little temper tantrum, I'll be your person.
Yeah, temper
Boy,
tantrums can be
fighting, right? Like fighting. You know, I thought about this, and I know Karen, I bet everybody has done this. Have you seen somebody somewhere where you're like, oh, that's a wrong chair? You got to have a better chair, right? You see people like that, and you know, when you make a difference and you say, hey, let's find you a provider that can help you and do that. And I bet all of you have done that. And people need to start speaking up. They need to become involved in groups that advocate or be their own advocate, right? Call their member of Congress, because their member of Congress is their friend. Like when we did all of our Hill visits the other day, I was like, yeah, I just get to meet with my friends. So, you know, it's important, right? Like to have, but we got to speak up.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, the
partially
whole-
why, I'm sorry, go ahead, Molly.
No, I was just going to say the whole conversation about nothing about us without us, and nothing happens without us, right? If we don't show up, then we have the status quo. And it's, you know, how to include, you know, more people. I'm doing a little posting where I'm asking everybody that I know, said, you know, if you know anybody in a wheelchair, well, okay, here I am. Just do a one-time write to your congressperson and your senators. Just send this message, and I'm doing a this message thing. Just send it to them today, you know, tomorrow, just one time even. You know, I imagine, you know, 2 million people sending letters.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, 5 million, however
It's
many.
what we need. And like, they're about to hopefully open that NCD, National Coverage Determination, for standing and seat elevation, trying to get
Yeah.
CMS to cover that in power chairs. They're about to open that for public comment. All of us and everyone on this call is going to have to tell everyone we know to make a public comment. You know, to counteract those who are not going to want to cover this because they don't understand it. And I would think that's the beauty. I like in-person events. Like even on this call, we can't see our wheelchairs. The visual impact of having hundreds of wheelchair users descend upon DC is an effective visual. But we now have virtual platforms, and we're going to have hybrid events. And the point was made earlier this week, people who absolutely can't travel because of money or their disability or whatever, we're going to have, we should be able to increase our numbers. We get them to go virtual, in addition to hopefully one day being back in DC and in their faces with our wheelchairs.
I think
Yeah,
I
the
want-
combination, I think that one of the things that's coming out of COVID is just this thing that we're doing here. That we're coming from all over the United States. I don't know if anybody's outside the United States on this, but we're together in a way that we have not ever been before. And I think it's going to turn out to be a huge asset.
Yeah, I think so too.
I was
Time
thinking-
and money.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. I was thinking about, the individuals that say they want to get involved, they don't want to, or that say they would maybe want XYZ type of equipment kind of thing, and they do medically need it. Is that, like, often I hear that they're like, well, we don't know if it'll get sent. I want to, like, scream in the most loving way that they deserve it. You're a value. We all are humans, and especially going through the insurance, we're a value. Speak up for yourself, even if you don't think the legislator will listen or whatnot.
And blame the right people. It's like you can blame the supplier, but I think what they don't understand a lot of times is we're dealing with the gold standard of Medicare and that being misinterpreted by private insurance as well. And you've got to think bigger, because what supplier doesn't want to sell more wheelchairs? Does that make any sense at all? No. But you know what? If you're going to complain, then advocate. But I know we're at the end of our session. I'm going to see if Annette has any closing words. And you guys are amazing. So good to see all of you. And thank you for joining the panel. And I'll hand it over to Annette.